It's not us versus them or me versus you.
So we're not talking about an us versus them mentality. We're going for this versus that.
This versus that.
Yeah, okay.
I think it helps you get along better.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Sometimes
We get along so well, and sometimes you're extreme right, I'm extreme left, I'm liberal, you're a conservative, and yet we get along so well. That's marvelous, wonderful.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Amazing grace.
So today,
Saved a wretch.
like you. So today, what we're going to do.
That's good. Come on, talk to me. Get in that microphone.
What we're going to do is trying to give you a little example of
An example. Give me an example of
this versus that thing.
Would he have said,
didn't want
come
to
on,
know.
Hillary, vote for me, baby?
No.
No.
I
wasn't
don't
doing
know. I don't know about that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Looks like we might be going around another loop. I don't know. How are you doing, Daryl?
Oh, I'm doing good. Glad to be here this morning.
Okay. Do you know what today is in the Christian world?
Something Sunday, probably.
Daryl.
The beginning of the holiest week of the year, or something like that.
Right. I think it's Palm Sunday, right? Surely,
is it?
we,
Okay.
yeah. Surely we haven't forgotten that much that fast.
I don't know about me sometimes. I remember what's important to me, if you know what I mean.
Right. Well, Diana, welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. What are you doing on Palm Sunday?
I could make a rude joke here, but I think I'll leave that alone.
Oh, I see. Well,
I posted on Facebook earlier that one of these days I'm going to become accustomed to being awake on Sunday mornings, but today is not that day.
oh, okay. Well, you surely cannot be religious then.
Oh, I remember all the pomp and circumstance from the Catholic Church when I was growing up, and yeah, this was a big week for them.
Yeah. You know, I thought about this morning and I thought to myself, you know, when you take a step back, you might think how sad but when you look at it as someone's ritual or belief system and you watch them, I don't think we would put as much disparagement on the people, let's just say out of Burkina Faso, West Africa, doing their, tribal rituals at certain times of the year, or maybe during a solstice. We would go over there and watch and ooh and ah and say it's beautiful, how clever, whatever. It's been there for generations, thousands of years, but we tend to pounce on the Christian this week that is experiencing those rituals and things like that. And I just think in my heart today, I don't want to do that. I'm certainly not a fan of the resurrection story anymore, the death story, or that Jesus had to die for someone's sins, had to have a blood sacrifice so people could just make it through life. I no longer believe that. But the people that do, it's a catch-22 for me. I want to say, oh my gosh, I wish you did not feel that way. I wish you didn't believe that way. But whenever they are, I want to say enjoying or going through the ritual, I really don't want to disparage them too harshly.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look back, strangely enough, I actually look back on that stuff with some degree of fondness.
Sure.
And back when I was at university the first time, I was trying to write a Mass of the Easter Vigil. Never did finish it. Maybe someday I will. I don't believe that stuff anymore, but it's still quite beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I do agree.
I seriously have thought about this. I don't want to disparage people, and so we keep our mouth shut. And
So we'll move on. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I get the troubling thing about all of this is Christianity isn't being sold just on Easter. It's not just being sold on, let's say, Palm Sunday. But, the adventures to crucifixion is what's going on
Right.
over the next few days. In other words, everyone is supposedly for Jesus, and yet no one defends Jesus. And he gets murdered, he gets crucified. And so this really doesn't make sense to a lot of people who actually want to be honest with the text. It doesn't
Yeah,
make
good
sense
point.
to our sense of morality. We have a better sense of morality today than they did back in the days of Jesus. And so should we trust these authors of the Bible, since they did not model a morality that's even close to being as good as what we see in a prison system?
Well, I say that's one reason to trust them as far as the accuracy somewhat of the happening. Because I can see that happening with the people wanting to crucify someone that was outside of their own narrative. Of course they would.
Okay,
And they did.
But I'm simply talking about stories that suggest that, the best teacher in Israel, Nicodemus, he meets with Jesus at night, and Jesus gives him some of the best ideas concerning how to rise above your current situation. And this guy's not willing to step up and say no when the Romans are saying we don't have any reason to crucify him. If we could just hear a word from someone out there, please, someone raise their hand and testify. Just say that this shouldn't be done and we won't do it. That's not what they do. And so when you can't find anyone, not even his disciples, not even the women who supposedly who are so passionately in love with him, not even his mother is crying out saying, this is not right. You really don't see that in the story. And so I think that having the tension on this day may be best for us now. That is the tension between those who are trying to say, no, we bought into something that was set up, because what the church is selling is technically not the story of Jesus. And so when we get excited about Palm Sunday and we get excited about Easter, in a church sense, we're getting excited about a lie that's been sold to the American public, so, Westerners. And so those of us in the West who have said, wow, this was a lie, if we could go back to the text and rethink it, if we were doing that, I would say let's do this. But I don't know. I'm torn. I don't know what to do, because I don't want to disparage those people who are going through ritual, as you're suggesting. Yet at the same time, if you're doing this on the basis of such lies and manipulation and condemnation and everything that forms disconnection, we're talking about a disconnection between Christians and everyone else, because in Christianity, everyone else goes where? For the most part, to hell, unless you're into universalism.
But they're offering this wonderful, unconditional love if you only just believe this stuff.
But
It's
that's not
wonderful.
It's not unconditional.
And the person that's going to do it for you, he made an effort to raise himself up 3 days later on your behalf. I mean, the way it's spun, and I'm not saying it's that way in the manuscripts, but the way I'm assuming man has spun this or spinned this, it's just spun. Anyway, it's a beautiful love story. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, you can make it into a beautiful love story, because a lot of people think, I don't have anyone who loves me. No one would ever do that for me, but this person did that for me.
I mean, we could exaggerate the story
Sure.
of any individual
Every
on the
story is
planet.
exaggerated. Every story I've
Well-
ever heard in my life has been exaggerated. I guarantee you.
But I guess my point is, why is it always Jesus? At some point we have to say, why can't we look at someone else and talk about their narrative, and other people too? Because, we get stuck, and this is hyperbole, and it continues to grow and grow and grow. And next Sunday morning, when you hear new sermons, it's going to be repurposed, a different spin, different take on Jesus. and that's how they keep the pew sitters. But it's always about Jesus. It can't be about someone else.
Well,
So,
who else rose from the dead after 3 days?
I mean,
Name them.
I'm simply
You know,
saying that.
hypothetically, that's why he gets that gravitas. I mean,
Do you actually think that he was resurrected from the dead?
well, that's a very good question.
And do the writers, are they suggesting a literal resurrection? And see, what the church has been, for the most part, has been either penal substitution or
I don't agree
another
with that.
glorified form of another kind of atonement, which, you might as well have the only way that we can demonstrate how much we love you is to make sure that, you don't live very long and you share a handful of words and then you die at 33. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Only the good die young. Haven't you ever heard that? Hey, Daryl, what do you think? Do you think Jesus did like a peep and hide? He wasn't exactly dead, or
Peep and hide, that's good.
or he just, I'm not making fun of him, but do you think maybe possibly?
Do you think that would offend a Christian
Yes, and I don't
if
want to
they
do
said
that.
a peep and hide?
Peep
You
and
just said a
hide.
peep and hide.
Peep and then peeps on Easter, those little peeps.
Okay.
That's cute. Okay,
You
but
couldn't even
Daryl,
confess to the resurrection this morning.
Daryl,
The adventures
Here's my
to
thing.
crucifixion.
I was just thinking of a song written by a really good songwriter from the 70s, Neil Young.
oh yeah,
He wrote a song called The Needle and the Damage Done. And, I've got a brother that got on drugs in his early teens. And the damage has never been and probably never will be overcome. I mean, it pretty much controlled his life, still does to a certain degree because of the damage done. And that's my concern these days. You can package something up and make it look really pretty. And obviously that happened to my brother. It's not that the damage that it would cause that attracted him to the drugs. It's the feeling that he got from it. I've never tried this stuff. I've never tried a drug. And so I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but apparently it's something very, you can get, and he's described some of it to me. It gives you a wonderful feeling. But what about the damage it does? And anymore, that's kind of the way I try to look at everything. And especially when it comes to religion or Christianity or a story that ends up not being true, and you pretty much base your life on that story. To me, there's more to life than that. And I can't help but see a lot of damage done to a lot of people. And to me, instead of disparaging people or trying to tear something down, let's look into it and see, where is this damage coming from? If we can, figure out a way to turn some of these things around, maybe the quality of life for people would go up rather than down. I think it would be worth putting to the test.
wow.
That's very good.
I'll tell you what, that is good. And something Daryl said made me think that when I stopped believing in a lot of the Christianity philosophies or Christian philosophies, I think I became a better person. And
Right.
don't you think?
Well, I
as
think
bad
that-
as I am now, I still
on.
became
I
a better person.
Yesterday, we were garage sailing. And what that means, we go from garage sale to another garage sale only to explore what it means to spend $1 on something. It's a lot of fun. Try it. But we stopped at this one place, and they had this huge piece of carpet, and I wanted it, and they only wanted $5 for it. So I said, okay, here you go. The people there, they were amazing. I complimented them. I said, wow, you guys are better than Jesus. And the man spoke up, no, we're not better than Jesus. He's far greater than we are. And I said, I don't think so. This really offended him, and I could see that it offended him, so I did my best to take that offense away. I said, listen, I'm not going to disparage Jesus, but I'm making a poetic point. I said, let me use you. I said, I'm assuming that you're a father and a grandfather. He said, yes, I'm a proud father and grandfather. And I said, well, you've in a sense already made my point. I said, as a father, as a grandfather, have you ever told your children or your grandchildren that you want them to think that you're better than them? He said, no. He said, I've always taught them that they need to feel good about who they are. I want them to feel better about who they are than they do dad or grandpa. And I said, that's my point. In other words, if you have a marvelous, wonderful Jesus or a marvelous, wonderful God, would he not want you to think better of yourself than him or whatever? And he said, I get your point now. And he agreed with it. But I had to, when I saw the gentleman offended, I had to immediately jump on that offense, in a sense, walk it back a bit. With a lot of strategy.
That wasn't the word I was looking for.
Okay, with a lot of what? Hyperbole?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm simply saying the BS game is
But it was thoughtful BS.
Okay, but thoughtful BS is Christianity. Is it not?
Or unthoughtful BS, either way.
Well, yeah, and some of it's not very thoughtful. Some of it's painful. Most of it's painful. I'm simply saying
I
that,
was proud of what you did.
sure, because I was able to get him to look at the possibility that should have been obvious. This guy was a wonderful person, and we couldn't pick the carpet up because they left it out in the rain. That's why they were selling it for $5, and so it needed to be dried out. And when you have a carpet piece that's 10 by 16 or however large it was, it's huge, and they sell it to you for $5, and it's worth a lot of money, and it's full of water. What do you want to have done? Can't pick it up. It's like picking up one of these swimming pools full of water. It's just too heavy. So he helped me roll it out and dry it out over at his house so we could pick it up. But my point was, he put a lot of labor into what he was doing. He put a lot of love in there, and so made the point with him. He agreed with the point, and I think that, in a sense, that's the way that you get people to walk away from the dark side of Christianity.
It's almost one at a time. It really
Right,
is.
it is.
It really is.
But I don't think that, we can, go to, let's say, a resurrection service and get up there and disparage people for being there, because so many people, like this morning, they're going to believe that it's by his death, burial, and resurrection that took away all of their sins. And for a moment, they're going to be able to feel good. For a moment, they're going to feel as if by his stripes we are healed. And so if this is a drug addict, this person feels like, yesterday I was a drug addict, now I'm not because of what Jesus did for me. I don't want to take that away from him, but he's going to have to face, some bumps in reality. And those bumps in reality are going to be really, really difficult, because he's just, he's pumped up a bit, and he has something that's motivating him. And so if it's useful in the context of motivation, that's good. Sustainability, you're not going to find that to be the fact.
Well,
and so he's going to have to hear the story told many times, different ways, and he's going to be told that you lacked enough faith and all kinds of stuff, because he's going to have a lot of bumps going on.
Sure, but I was going to ask Diana this question. Do you believe that people have believed in this story of a resurrected Jesus that has done these marvelous works for you, not you, but, the person, and have they've gotten off drugs and maintained a life that is, at least morally, I hate to use the word moral, because not everyone has that definition of what morals are. My moral compass is a little bit different than somebody else's, whatever. But just, let's say mores in the community or whatever, what we're supposed to be doing as a community, and that's even, for judgment there. But what I'm trying to say, Diana, is, do you believe it's possible that someone can actually kick the habit of drugs based on a false story that they've heard in church?
Well, I've got to wonder how much of that is the story or how much of that is the community? I mean, there's no question that, the religion, the churches offer community, offer a place for people to be, for a place for people to belong. And perhaps that is what turns a lot of people around. I know I've read a couple of papers recently where the big thing about getting off drugs is to have something that you feel makes your life worthwhile, to have friends, to have a community, to have things to do.
Right.
So are you getting more from that than you are from the story?
The story.
And then I wonder too, how much of that story was a fiction for the people of the time who, saw that they were losing their temple. And the Jews were all about blood magic.
Sure.
You had to sacrifice, the whole thing like that. So now, as in I think it was Hebrews, where you have the perfect sacrifice once for all, and they are all justified. They are all fine now. But it still had to be that blood sacrifice. The character had to die. How much of that is it?
Okay, but here's another way of looking at that same question. For instance, Diane is talking about failed meta-language and the outcome of that, and this is what the church is selling. It's this perfect lamb. He comes along, and we no longer need sacrifices, and so it's over. And so atonement is finally over, and so we don't have to sacrifice any longer because the perfect lamb has come. But if you're writing that story, that is in the book of Hebrews, to suggest, well, this is what we're doing to suggest that we never needed a sacrifice, the outcome is much different. Mm-hmm. And when you read the Greek text, one of the things that you find, and when you study mimetic theory, you're going to see that human beings tend to want to find someone who will become their scapegoat. And so in the sense of, let's say, a drug addict, oh, he's going to take all of my guilt, all of my shame, all of my problems away. I can put all of this on Jesus. He becomes the divine scapegoat. And we find scapegoatisms throughout history, not just religion. We do this, we see this in Donald Trump. People are trying to make Donald Trump into the scapegoat of all time. And so the reason that America is the way that America is has to do with Donald Trump. And the facts do not bear that out. My point is, it doesn't matter whether you are in religion or not. There's just a lot of exaggeration that goes on. And so in the mind's eye of a drug addict, if they're trying to get better or, go through rehab, they're going to have people who are support people. Now, some of these support people could simply be characters in story. And if they believe that the story is true, and if one of these characters happens to be still alive, like Jesus, that's someone he can go to day and night. And so in that, Meinong, a psychologist, said that we do tend to create a bit of fiction that runs parallel to our reality, and it really, really helps. And so in that sense, I would advocate that if the story is told, that is, therapeutically, it could do a lot of good for a lot of people. If you're telling it as if this is the ultimate truth, I think that's when it gets really, really shady. And so think about this. So many drug addicts are so disconnected from, from social constructs simply because of their addiction, their illness. And they don't know who to trust, but inwardly, if they can hold on and cling on to some hope through the narrative of Jesus, would that be good? I think there is a way to tell story, use story, powerfully so, that is in counseling. Therapeutically, we get well because of these stories. Sometimes when people watch movies like, or not, this is a series called This
Is Us.
This Is Us. If you haven't watched it, you need to.
I mean, America loves it.
Oh, yeah. This is a story about a family and lots of pain, lots of joy, lots of getting over this and that. I would suggest, you watching this. I mean, it's a powerful series.
And you cry about every episode.
Well, I cry 15 to 20 times during every episode, and so, yes, I am a crier. But my point is, this isn't a true story.
I meant you, as we all do.
Right, but I'm simply saying this is not a true story, but it exemplifies, what's happening within the narrative of many families.
Sure.
And so, likewise, it's kind of like the argument, well, did Matthew write Matthew? The argument is, and I'm going to get into this in a few days, who authored what, when, and how, what should we lean toward, that is, when it comes to the theory of how they should be dated. There are various models. There are external, internal models that we need to deal with in higher and lower forms of textual criticism, but that's a boring talk on this show. But my point is, I think that today being Palm Sunday, this compassionist, if you will, if I can tell this story, in a heartbeat, I would be outside cutting down the palms that wave in front of our studio. I would cut those palms, not completely down, but I would cut the palms off of the palm trees that we have out front and throw them in front of anyone who's leading a movement of compassionism like we see in that story. And so, yes, if there was someone who took, let's say, the least among vehicles, in a sense, the jackass, if someone were willing to humble themselves, namely in the manner in which we see in that narrative, humility is something that all of us need. Just focus in on that message alone. Humility, humility, humility. Think about how much we could, as human beings, really resonate with each other if we had just a small degree of humility. I mean, that would be wonderful. And so if I could go to church, if I could go to, let's say, a civic center event and someone was speaking on humility and I resonated with that message, it would do me a hell of a lot of good. It would really help me to walk across the street and have a little bit of hope, because it's not about being so prideful. And this is something that I think that we all need. We need more humility. We need more empathy for other people. And so when you can not just have humility, but you can think about concepts of, wow, what is this guy doing? He's meeting with the disciples, and these disciples are wanting to know, why are you always telling stories, that is, parables? And he said, well, everything is said because if I tell someone a parable, they're not going to be forgiven. Now, why isn't Jesus wanting these people, in a theological sense, to get forgiven? It's interesting. He keeps telling stories to all of the masses. Why? Because he's not trying to get anyone saved. Hello? He's trying to do what? He's trying to deconstruct theological hardcore dogma. And he's doing so gently. And this is why I don't get what Robert Price is doing. I don't get what Richard Carrier's doing. Both of them are spinning a failed meta-language in the name of atheism. Not reason, but in the name of an ism that isn't doing anybody any good. And so if people in the concept or the context of atheism, if they want to stand up on this day and suggest they're doing something good because they have something to say concerning this particular narrative that we find in the Bible, I would challenge whether you're taking a competent approach. And number two, I would challenge you in what people are doing with story all over the place. Am I making sense? Because people use stories. We tell stories to our children. Connor will sit down. Grandpa, can you read this to me? Or look at this. He wants story. They're longing for something about story. I mean, he's not looking at his iPad because he's looking at human beings. He's looking at cartoons. He can make these little figures jump up and down in the games that he plays. I can't jump that high. No human being can jump that high. He likes the superheroes. Oh, okay, he likes the superheroes. Should I take his superheroes away from him and say, no, deal with reality? That doesn't make any sense, does it?
I'd have to think about that one for a while.
Okay. Diane, a question. You've heard me teaching somewhat in the Bible over the last 2 Wednesday nights. Have any of the things that I've stated concerning X, Y, or Z in the Bible resonated with you? It made you feel good?
Well, if anything, it's got me thinking, and thinking does make me feel good. I mean, wanting to learn makes me feel good. And as far as what's in the text and everything, I guess it does make me feel good in the sense that it's a direction orthogonal to that which modern Christianity is taking, and maybe that is a good thing. Maybe we need to focus on, as you were saying, about being justified, the faithfulness rather than the blind faith. Those are good things to me. So yeah, I'm resonating with that.
See, I'm simply saying that if we as human beings can come to the point to where if we hear someone with an idea that is much different than ours, if we can at least give them enough room to stay at the table, that will be good. And so in the sense with this Christian narrative of Palm Sunday, let's not try to disparage them and take everything away from them. This is why I'm not for the taking down of the cross on public property. You take that down and you say, well, there shall not be any religious symbol on any, let's say, government-owned property. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to go into every library, public library, and let's go in there and take all the Bibles out and all the religious rhetoric that's in all of these books? I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, look at all the symbols that we have throughout literature and throughout history and all of that. What are we going to do? Destroy that? The secular movement needs to become more about being pluralistic. In other words, with the understanding that not everything rests upon the same axis. People find themselves in this narrative and that narrative. It doesn't mean that they can't be secular. It means that there has to be a principle set that's allowing for various things, because most people are multi-axial. And so that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
I'm getting a bit boring for you.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. Not at all.
Let's
Maybe
shift
Daryl
gears.
Daryl might be asleep. I'm not sure. Did Michael bore you just now?
Not much. I'm okay. I'm so far.
My wife was asleep.
No.
But
The one thing that does concern me about the religious symbols on, well, government property especially, is could that not be these people saying, see who's in charge here?
I
And
don't-
thereby not being inclusive, rather stating this is the way it must be, question mark.
Daryl, what are your thoughts on Diana's point?
well, I'm not real clear. Who are we? I mean, who is saying that they're in charge here? I think I missed something.
You know, what concerns me is that the folks who are putting the religious symbols up, especially on government property, the Roy Moore types with the Ten Commandments in the courthouse, or has it gone through completely now in Tennessee where "In God We Trust" must be displayed in the schools? I mean, could that be a certain subset of Christians saying, we are in charge and you've got to follow in step?
Yeah, I don't doubt that whatsoever. But you've always got the extremists in whatever you're dealing with, and I don't think we need to cater to those people just because they have the loudest voice, just because they have the strongest demands. I don't think that we need to give in to that. I think we need to find a place that will at least attempt to satisfy all involved. I mean, if someone's right, let's just say the Roy Moores are right, and I've contended this for a long time. There's, of course, I'm a person that spent so much time involved with Scripture, Bible, that I know a lot of things that it says. And one thing it says, greater is he that's in me than he that is in the world. Well, let the greater one prove himself rather than you have to prove himself to someone, you know. If you're trying to raise somebody from the dead and they don't raise, well, you know, maybe you're not doing it right, but then again, maybe the one that's supposed to be doing the raising is not listening or not interested in that person being raised. You know? And so, you know, I think if you have a God that you have to do all his bidding for him, then that's a bit extreme, especially if he's the all powerful one, you know. Say your piece and go on, you know. If you don't get your way and putting the cross up in front of the courthouse, put it in your front yard, you know.
Oh,
But he had extreme about it, you
You know,
know.
I've got no problem with putting cross in your front yard as far as that goes. There was a house that I used to pass a lot when I was on a bus route going through one of the Pittsburgh suburbs. The guy had signs all over his place, you know, blessed be the Lord and all this other stuff. That was his house. He can do whatever he wants.
There's a lady here in town that has a pickup and she's got 40 or 50 bumper stickers on the back of the truck and on the back windshield. And, you know, I look at it and kind of smile and kind of get a kick out of it, but it's her truck and she has every right to do that. It doesn't offend me at all. And personally, I don't have any bumper stickers. I don't have anything I think I need to, you know, display in that manner. But that's, you know, I feel very fortunate to live in a country, in a location to where that's okay. You know, we have the liberty to do that sort of thing.
You know,
Or not.
Yeah.
So it should.
Well, what scares me is that small subset of extremists has a lot of political power here.
okay, but
That's not good.
Yeah,
don't
I
think
see
that's
that.
Right.
Yeah.
let's look at it this way. Look at what these boring people are doing. We're talking about librarians. They are simply providing lots and lots of books. Yeah. If you go into a library, you may find, and I'm talking about a public library, you may find a Biblia Sacra, okay? What do you mean? You may find something like this or even an older version. This thing is older than Daryl, believe it or not. Okay? The reason I have it out here, I was going to make a point the other night and failed to do so. Here's my point, guys, and it should be simple. If secularism becomes a one-way street, is that good? I would argue no. If secularism is pluralistic in that it provides, that is, all of the data to be on the table so we can look carefully at it, I would applaud it. In other words, if this can be in the public library, should not the product that's found in here also be allowed to be, say, symbolized elsewhere on public property? For instance, I supported David Silverman. He's a very great person, love him to death. Don't agree with his argument, don't agree with his dogmatic position in atheism. But my point is, I supported his heart. His heart was, let's put this atheist monument right here in Tallahassee, our state capital, by the way, and let's put it on public property. I supported that because I'm very much a skeptic, and I'm very much for a secular community if that means being pluralistic, that is, putting everything on the table. I'm for that, but I'm not for a secular community that says everything needs to rest upon one axis. That's not where the American people are. People have different beliefs. Now, your belief may be atheism, or your belief may be theism. I don't care. Or your belief may be to suspend judgment on the question of God. Some would argue, no, I just lack belief. Well, anytime that you form a view of X, whether it be left or right, yay or nay, if you have formed a viewpoint, you have a belief. A lot of people are trying to get away from propositional attitudes, but a belief is a propositional attitude. Whatever your attitude is toward the proposition is a belief. My point is, philosophers agree with what I'm saying, but most people, and the great debate are like Roy Moore. And you would have to put on the table, Diana, that there's not much difference between Roy Moore and Aaron Ra, and I love Aaron Ra. Would you agree with that? I'm talking about
Yeah,
the
it does
dogmatism.
kind of tend that way.
Right.
Now, Aaron has to be adversarial, or at least he thinks he does, because he's in the fight with another single axis, very strongly single axis group.
But
That's doing a lot of damage.
Okay, but think about how ridiculous. I mean, isn't it true that Apistavism is as ridiculous as Roy Moore trying to put the Ten Commandments in the courthouse? I mean, come on. I mean, no cognitive scientist alive or in the past has ever suggested that people are without faith. Noam Chomsky, he's very much an agnostic leaning toward atheism. He said that we have faith in our senses. We're born with faith in our senses. Now, this guy is brilliant. Steven Pinker agrees with me. I have faith in my senses. Should we not have faith in our senses? I've had Aaron Ra in this show. Aaron Ra, as soon as I said, I have faith in my senses, he is so disturbed, or maybe it's a phobia that is concerning this term. He doesn't want to use the word faith. And so what does he have? I mean, when he listens to the stories that Richard Carrier is telling, these things are not built upon methods of science, methods of how we do history, and yet Aaron Ra spins them. That means that he has faith in what? I mean, the kind of faith that you would see in church, correct? And yet he will get up and say he doesn't have any kind of faith, and he's leading people into a very it's almost like into the biggest lie of history. I mean, to lead people into Apistavism is the same thing that the Christians did with the Bible. It's misinformation, and it becomes disinformation. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Oh, absolutely. I am very much against the way people misuse, let's say, the word faith, or the way they misuse the texts. But going from one extreme to another is not a good thing. What I would really like to see is more people learn how to look at these things not as this is the way to do it and this is the way to be, but for all the nuances they may carry. I mean, heck, since April, I've learned quite a bit about the concept of faith. Thank you for having Ozzy and Stephen and a few other people on that, gave me an idea of what faith ought to be. And what I'd like to see is people learn more about that rather than what they've been fed. That makes sense.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, absolutely. The cross that my husband was talking about earlier is an old cross. It's been there. How old is it? I'm just guessing.
I can't remember the
say-
date. I had it in my mind.
Say
but-
it's 60 years, give
I
or
was going
take.
to say it's probably as old as I am.
Okay.
Okay, we'll
now,
say that.
it the original cross that was there was taken down. Another one was constructed, and this has a story that is that's really compelling. That in a sense, it's almost like having a lighthouse for many. And when you talk to people in Pensacola about it, it's not the Jesus story, but it's just a symbol. They painted it white. That they don't have it as the old rugged cross, and people tend to take a story, repurpose the story, and so we do this with the alphabet. We take A, B, and C, and we use them differently, and this is why we have algebra. We didn't keep the A just for words. We can get them into a system of mathematics. Do you see where I'm coming from? And so my point is, this thing has been repurposed many times, and yet people are trying to say I'm too offended about this. And that's going on here in Pensacola.
Right. And it's at a public park, and it's at the very tail end of a part of it that, jets out into the bay. And I've been there so many times. Honestly, I've never hardly ever noticed it
Now it jets into Tehar, Bayou Tehar.
by the bayou. Yeah,
the bayou.
that's
and,
true.
And it's remote.
It's very remote.
If I tried to tell Daryl how to get there, and he's very good with directions, loves to travel. It's not very far from here, but it would probably take him 4 days to get there because it's that difficult to get there. You
It's
have to go through many twists and turns, and then by the time that you get there, you can't see it from all angles. You have to go down there by the boat ramp to be able to look back and say, "Oh, look at that cross,
there it is.
doggone! It looks like a big anchor." It's ugly.
But
okay?
right, but it meant something to, I think, this man's wife or something when she
Right.
died, and he put it up in memoriam to her, and now people, that's what I get. They're just so offended. Honestly, it drives me crazy. There are many things that the secular world or atheists are offended about that I stand with them and say, but this is just something that I'm just saying. I think you need to put your money on another horse and try to, put your efforts somewhere else and do something. This is, and then talking about, taking the crosses off at people in the national cemeteries that we have of people that have died and been in service. And of course, they'll put a cross if you're Christian. They'll put I think, Star of David if you're Jewish. I don't know what they put on atheists. Nothing. I don't know.
As far as the atheists go, they put up the symbol, the
Molecule?
that atomic symbol,
Oh,
the symbol of the American atheists.
okay.
right.
That one goes up.
Okay. Cool. That's great. But to have this scuttlebutt about, well, I don't think the crosses should be on these guys and women's graves. That
Now,
really,
there-
that's too much.
But there is a symbol here in Pensacola. It's easy to find. It's on one of our more famous streets, and that would be on Palafox, and it's actually Martin Luther King. So my question is, why are not the atheists here in this community who are supported, and actually the lawyers are from this group, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, why are they not going after Martin Luther King and all the writings? Because all of these things are within the framework of Christianity, number one. Number two, these things are all Jesus stories. This was all about the gospel. It's all about theology, according to Martin Luther King Jr. And so when is the last time that you've seen atheists going after Martin Luther King Jr.? I mean, why would they not take him on instead of trying to take a cross on that's out somewhere that no one ever sees? I mean, I don't get that. Go after something that's a little bit more visible. Does that make sense? Would you want Martin Luther King's figure with everything that he said underneath has a lot to do with God? Do you want that taken off public property?
Well, number one, that would be political suicide. Number two,
Okay, but you're getting my point. People are not.
Suicide of any sort, it would be suicide.
I mean,
He
I'd
had
like
a
to
lot-
see the atheist
to say
take
that
him
was
down,
good.
go after Martin Luther King Jr. and make your point and see if you can make it. You can't make it well. There's not a compelling argument to do that. This guy found himself in Christianity and used the model of theology.
Reverend Dr.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King.
The Reverend, okay? We're talking about the Reverend of all time. There is no greater pastor, preacher, movement maker than Martin Luther King Jr., and he was all about theology, theological narrative. He used theological narrative to say, we have a dream. The premise of that was not psychologically spun. It was all about being where? It was about going someplace with a narrative of theology. Now, my question is, that's not secular according to how the Freedom from Religion Foundation is using secularism. It's very religious. So why didn't they go after Martin Luther King Jr.? And why don't they stop all the marches that are going on? Because they certainly are happening, not just on private property, but on public property. And we have this in the school. How many of you guys have seen in the school Martin Luther King's pictures up in the schoolhouse? I mean,
Sure.
Diana, are we going to take them all down?
Oh, you've got a point there.
Hello, I do have a
Honestly,
point.
it's something I hadn't considered. I hadn't considered Dr. King with his narrative. It was very theologically driven. And I suppose that's the language he knew, that's the language that the people he was speaking to knew. And yeah, is there an equivalence there? And, that there may be. I mean, his message and the message of the Pensacola Cross, it's some, yeah, that does help tell the story. And I guess, okay, if you're going to have one, why don't you have many? That might not be a bad idea. I suppose there are some good stories to be had from, well, the Torah and the Old Testament bear a lot of resemblances. So let's go to the Bhagavad Gita, or let's go to the Analects of Confucius. Let's see if we can find some stuff there too. I wouldn't mind that.
Okay, let's look at it through a different lens for a moment, okay? Let's say that we voted in, let's say one of these radical atheists like Aaron Ra, and we said, Aaron, this is your job. You need to go deal with Israel. Could he do a good job, a sufficient job dealing with Israel after having such a mindset of epistevism? Does he have a good mindset when it comes to going to different countries? Many countries are not a democracy. Many countries are a democracy. Or does Aaron Ra want everyone that is on this little planet that we call Earth, does he want everyone to be like us?
Well, I hope he doesn't want everyone to be like us, because we're not in such great shape right now.
Well, but you get my point. I mean,
Yeah.
do all people need to become like him in order for him to be satisfied? Because this is what I hear from Roy Moore. Roy Moore has a rhetoric, this constant rhetoric. You've got to be like him. You've got to be a Christian. You've got to be dedicated to God so you can go to heaven. When I listen to Aaron Ra, and I'm not picking on him, I'm picking on the substance that he puts out.
I mean, y'all are friends, so you can pick on him.
Yeah, I love the guy to death. He loves me, and we walk down the streets of Pensacola. But with clarity, I want to say that his rhetoric, it's not doing anyone any good. When you keep saying that we should have absolutely no faith, it's absurd to take the approach that he's taking. And I would say that linguistically, it's the most absurd thing being marketed, and yet so many atheists are resonating with this, and it's being resonated with so much so, I've even been told by many, many, many atheists and many atheist groups on Facebook that some of these atheists don't even have belief of any kind. When I've asked them, and I've recorded all this, by the way, to prove what I'm saying, I've asked some atheists, put on the shelf all religious rhetoric. My question to you is, do you have any belief at all? And you know what the answer was? No, I don't have any kind of belief. I took some writings from Stanford and other universities and professors and posted them all over the place, just trying to get them to read the fabric of how people are talking about belief sets and why people are dealing with, let's say, propositional attitude in the way that they are dealing with it. And they still continued to argue that they had absolutely no belief at all. So the question would be, when it comes to people who don't read books, can this be said of just these fundamentalist Christians only? I don't think so. And so that's my point.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is a reaction in kind, to those who are using or misusing, shall I say, faith and belief to achieve their ends, which aren't necessarily contributing to the well-being of all. And then you go to the other extreme, where, okay, they're doing a bad thing, I'm going to get rid of all of it. I mean, if these people are saying that they have absolutely no belief, if you guys are listening, you're stupid. Of course, we all have beliefs. Dr. Jones, I believe you're a big sweetie. Rhonda, you too. Daryl, same thing. That's a belief. Let's get serious here.
But it's somewhat faith too.
Oh yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We can have faith in one another. We can be faithful to each other, correct? I mean, we should not be afraid of the word. Let's not be paranoid. Let's not get into the kind of rhetoric that we see. And so one thing that we're trying to do here at NCG, we've had enough conversations with atheists and theists alike. Why can't we move on? That's what we're talking about today. What if? What if we actually moved on? And how do we deal with the landscape of where people find themselves? Today, people are doing Palm Sunday. They are excited about throwing branches in front of this Compassionist. I can see that, even though I'm not a Christian, but I can see the value of saying, let's come together and let's throw branches in front of someone who's doing something that good. I mean, I can see that part of it.
Yeah, I can.
You know, you can see it.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
like
can
it as
see
long
it.
as it's not coming together against people we don't like.
Right.
There's a YouTube person I really like. The guy goes by the name of Martimer81. Something he said a while back really resonated with me. He said, religion unites by dividing. And yeah, it's, let's all get together, our little group here, against the people we think are icky, even though we have no reason to believe they are icky. That's a bad thing.
Right.
Why can't we at least talk?
Right.
Get to
Right.
the table, have a cup of coffee, and just, have some conversation for
Yeah.
Christ's sake.
Hey, you were going to say something else.
I was going to say something else. Yeah.
Lord, on Palm Sunday too. Daryl, do you know what she was getting ready to say on Palm Sunday? Okay, it's confirmed.
Daryl.
Daryl.
Yes.
Yes.
What,
So
what was Diana getting ready to say? What was the word? Can you spell it for us?
don't say it. Don't
Come
do
on,
it.
Daryl.
I'm sorry, I'm at a loss there, but I did want to say something, maybe on the same subject, maybe on another subject, I don't know.
You just shot in the dark here.
I agree that we all have beliefs. I mean, I think that's irrefutable. And I think it's more of a question of what do we do with our beliefs? We can share them with others, especially if we think they're valuable. But do we need to force those beliefs on anyone else? And I think that it would be a good thing possibly to take that same approach with God. Let's just say there's a God. Do we need to prove that, or does God need to prove that? And it seems like when it comes to that, most people are in the position that they're uncomfortable with waiting for some kind of proof from this superior being. They would rather take it upon themselves to prove it and to force that upon others. And I think that's a lot of where the problem comes in. And even if your belief is kind of that mathematical equation that you love so much, the fact, whether there's not one, why does that have to be crammed down into one's throat? As long as no one is trying to force their set of beliefs on someone else, you're just willing to share them and think, maybe express the value that they have to yourself and see where it goes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah, it is
That's
good.
really good.
It's
I mean,
time.
what's
Okay,
the
it's
big
time.
deal with them? Okay, I'm bringing it back to my favorite topic, and I guess that's what the extremists harp on most. If I happen to get lucky enough to find someone who's really wonderful, and that person thinks I'm really wonderful, and we want to get married, and we get married, what's it to them if that person is another woman? If they think we're going to burn in hell for that, well, what's the big deal? There's more room in heaven for you. And why try to legislate that away?
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I don't know. That's the age-old question: is why? And I believe we're souls, and I think our souls are genderless. So if my soul falls in love with your soul, we're soul. It's to say that we fall in love, with our body parts of the other person or whatever. That'll never work.
Sure puts a lot of emphasis on that three-letter word, doesn't it? It's all about sex, right?
Exactly. And my
Yeah.
gosh, that's the least, in my
Should be,
opinion,
yeah.
should be. You're right, Daryl. It does, and so let's fall in love with souls today.
Yeah.
The novelty.
I think we need to do a show on how to turn our teeth whiter.
Okay, we can try. I don't think it.
Mine were really, really brown, then they turned yellow, and they're a little bit whiter.
So they're in transition.
Yeah, they're in transition. I've been using this electric. It's not really
Say
a
it right.
toothbrush, but it's almost like a grinder. And I know that you guys who've been watching the place for a long, long time, you said, "Wow, look at that guy's got wooden teeth." Yeah, they were woodies. They had slime, and
Oh boy.
we have an algae eater in the tank. He'd get out and swim around in my mouth, and it was just
That really helped
tragic.
the most.
But what fed all of that algae in my teeth was actually all of the big chocolate donuts with Bavarian cream, and so I had to stop that. With that said, we're going to have to quit. We're overtime.
Overtime.
We don't even get paid for overtime.
We don't, so we have got to go.
Got to go. Got to go.
Got the twist
We're out of
off.
here. Jack, let's go.
All right. Thanks, guys and girls.